Yo, what's going on, everybody? Time for another installment of the Stranger Things series. I just went up, took a little break from the YouTube, played some mini hoop, and I am back and ready to talk about Season 4, Episode 2 of Stranger Things. The second episode where people know something's going down. Sorry if I'm panting or breathing heavily. I'm going to try not to. But yeah, I'm just going to kind of go over my thoughts on this episode, give you guys kind of what happened if you don't feel like watching the show, or if you've already watched it and you want a recap of kind of what happened to kind of get yourself ready for the rest of the series. But yeah, I mean, we're brought another shivering episode. Definitely nightmare fueling. Finds Vecna snatching up another poor, unfortunate soul. Elle getting her revenge on Angela, and finally answers the questions we've all been waiting for. What happened to Hopper? The episode opens with a flashback to the crucial final moments when we last saw Hopper in the Season 3 finale, which I do remember this part of the show, but a lot of Season 3 was definitely a blur for me. After Hop sacrifices himself to destroy the gate, the platform starts to explode and becomes engulfed in flames, just like we saw in the finale. But then the episode shows us what we didn't see, and no, Hop didn't get trapped in the Upside Down, which admittedly would have been a lot cooler. But instead, Hopper simply jumps down onto a lower platform. He manages to climb through the smoke and wreckage and up the ladder, only to be blocked by the Russians who are waiting at the top, guns pointed at him. He is taken to Russia, where he is ruthlessly tortured for information. When he doesn't give up Joyce's identity, even though he is just barely surviving, the Russians send him to Kamchatka to work for the motherland. But this is certainly not an act of mercy. Kamchatka, the guard says, is hell. Back in Hawkins, Max jerks away from a nightmare. As she is standing at the sink, again taking more medicine for yet another headache, she watches a bunch of cop cars speed into the trailer park and stop outside Eddie's trailer. Outside, officers Phil Callahan and Calvin Powell talk to Wayne Munson, Eddie's uncle, who is visibly shaken. The cops walk into the trailer and they are horrified, clearly at a loss of what they are seeing. Max is able to sneak inside to get a quick glimpse inside where she sees Chrissy's corpse, her limbs twisted. Again, a terrible sight from episode 1. In California, Jonathan, Argyle, Elle, and Will wait for Mike at the airport. Will is holding a rolled-up painting he is clearly going to give Mike. They jump up in excitement when they see him, and Mike gives Elle flowers he handpicked from Hawkins. Elle is excited, but her face falls slightly when she looks at the card, which is signed from Mike, noticeably not love. I didn't catch that part, actually. Wow, interesting. Mike and Will have an awkward reunion, and Will, looking disappointed, doesn't give Mike the painting. Elle excitedly tells Mike she has their whole day planned, while Will walks next to them, clearly left out, which sucks because Mike and Will, for their whole childhoods throughout this series, have been really good friends. He looks at Elle in confusion when Mike asks Elle when he is going to meet her friends, Stacy and Angela. Elle brushes it off quickly and says he will meet them eventually, which is cap. She's not friends with anybody. She's trying to hide the fact that she's been bullied this whole time. As they exit the airport, we see Murray hopping into a cab on his way to meet Joyce and figure out what the hell is up with that shady letter from Russia. When he gets to the buyer's residence, he reads the full message. Hop is alive. He looked forward to date. Please to make reservation. Call 74152 blah blah. Open 12 days. PETT. No government. Please. Kind regards, Enzo. Murray says it reads and looks too much like a ransom note, and he doesn't trust it, especially because there's no proof that Hopper is alive in the note. Joyce says that only she and Hopper knew about their Enzo date, so it must be Hop sending her a message. Joyce, never wanted to be deterred, points out that there was no body, cardinal rule. We all saw that from a mile away when that episode aired. Murray counters with a more likely theory that if he miraculously survived, he was probably captured by the KGB, who tortured information out of him, including their date at Enzo's, and this is all just an elaborate ruse to capture Joyce as Hop's conspirator, and probably held her hostage as well. I mean, Russia's a pretty evil country, to be honest with you. They're very strict. They're very blunt about things. Yeah. Joyce convinces him to give it a shot, and he begrudgingly agrees to call the number. In Russia, a payphone rings, and we see a man, Enzo, answer. He says if they want to get Hopper back, they have to go to Alaska and make a deposit of $40,000, which he knows isn't Hopper's trust. In Alaska, They will meet with a man named Yuri and give him the money, which he will then in turn give to Enzo. While he is talking, a woman outside the phone booth bangs on the door and yells something at him in Russian. Joyce says that if he wants her to go to Alaska, she needs to speak to Hop to confirm he is alive. Yuri informs her that isn't possible because Hopper is stuck, but if she brings the 40,000, he will be unstuck. Murray and Joyce listen to the recording of the phone call in an attempt to figure out who Enzo is. They are able to raise the volume of the woman speaking in the background to Enzo using Jonathan's sound system. Murray translates that the woman calling him a mooser, which is Russian slang for pig, and is usually directed at cops or guards in Russia. Joyce and Murray realize that Hop must be stuck in prison and maybe bribed Enzo to break him out. Joyce tells Murray to pack because they are going to Alaska to get Hopper back. Rhymes. Meanwhile, Jonathan and Argyle drop Mike, Will, and Elle off at Rinkomania, where a miserable Will is forced to play the third wheel all afternoon. Elle lies to Mike and says she goes to parties here at the skating rink all the time. Will confronts her when he and Elle get a minute alone and tells her Mike doesn't deserve to be lied to, and he's going to be upset when he finds out. Unfortunately for Elle, it looks like her lies are about to unravel because Angela and her pack of high school hyenas show up at the rink. They're delighted to see Elle, or the snitch as they're now calling her, even though she didn't even snitch, really. She didn't even say they did something bad to her, but obviously jumping at the opportunity to humiliate her in front of her boyfriend. They go over to Elle's table to introduce themselves, and Mike tells her it's nice to finally get to meet one of Elle's friends. Angela puts on her fakest smile and tugs Elle out of the booth to come skate with her. Will looks on nervously as Angela pulls Elle along the rink, and a circle slowly forms, leaving Elle in the center. One of Angela's friends is holding up a giant video camera when one of the DJs announces that the next song is dedicated to Jane. Will hurriedly explains to Mike in a panic that Elle has been lying to him and she has actually been having a hard time in California. Wipeout starts to play as all the kids start rolling up to Elle and calling her a freak and a loser, kind of cringy, kind of corny, but it is kind of the lore of what happened in high school, definitely back in the day at least. As they mockingly stretch their hands out like Elle did earlier when she instinctively reached for her powers. That's funny, because Elle doesn't have her powers anymore. Elle starts to cover her ears and cry while Mike races to the DJ and demands they turn it off. Just as the record comes to a screeching halt, one of Angela's lackeys rolls up to Elle and throws a chocolate milkshake at her, causing her to slip on her skates and fall backward. Mike calls out to Elle and tries to break through the crowd while Elle makes an escape from the rink. Very embarrassing moment for Elle. Her plan of trying to get Mike to think that she has friends backfires. Yeah. Jesus, what the hell happened? While Mike is looking for Elle, he asks why Will has been moping all day, and Will tells him with frustration that Elle has been lying to him ever since he got there. Not to mention he's been a third wheel all day. Will calls Mike out for only calling him a handful of times over the course of the year they've been gone, while Elle has a book of letters from him. Will says they're supposed to be best friends, and Mike shrugs him off, annoyed, and asks why Will didn't reach out more and why it has to be all of his fault. Elle decides to confront Angela and demand an apology. Angela, of course, laughs and smiles like the Cheshire Cat and mockingly tells her, "Cry to your daddy, but oh wait, you can't." As she turns around, Elle screams her name, but this time, instead of trying and failing to use her power, she does the next best thing her instincts think of. She grabs her roller skate and smashes it in Angela's face. Angela is stunned as blood starts pouring down her face and she starts screaming. It dawns on Elle what she has done as she watches everyone race over to Angela. Mike looks at Elle and echoes Dr. Brenner. He asked, "What did you do?" If anything, Angela got off easy. That skate was plastic. Imagine what Elle could do if she had her powers. Jonathan and Argyle, meanwhile, are hitting golf balls in an abandoned junkyard while the kids are at the rink. Jonathan admits he secretly hoped Nancy would surprise him at the airport, but he also felt relief when she wasn't there. Conflict in his relationship here. He shows Argyle his acceptance letter to Lenora Community College, and he confides in him that he is not going to Emerson because he doesn't want to leave his mom and brother to go chase a dream that isn't his. If he told Nancy the truth, she'd throw her dreams out of the window to be with him instead, and eventually she'd grow to resent him. I'm literally recapping the entire episode. This is going to be... And shout out to Collider because they definitely gave me this info. In Hawkins, everyone is watching the news where there are reports of an unnamed teenage girl who has been found murdered. The cops question Jason about Chrissy's whereabouts last night. Was she partying with them after the game? What is her relationship with Eddie Munson? Jason is stunned and terrified and tells him Chrissy said she was going home after the game to change. He insists that she would never do drugs and has nothing to do with a freak like Eddie. He storms into the woods and falls to his knees as he began to sob and lets out a guttural scream. Later, he tells his boys that Eddie is a Satanist who must have sacrificed Chrissy to the devil. He claims that Hellfire is a satanic cult. When Lucas tentatively tells him it is just a D&D club, Jason insists that there's an epidemic sweeping the country where people who play D&D are warping fantasy and reality and killing people, which is kind of ridiculous. It's kind of like this school shooter stereotype. Convinced Eddie is going to kill again, Jason gives another one of his stupid motivational speeches where he rallies his teammates to hunt the freak, Eddie Munson. Max confides in Dustin that she saw Eddie with Chrissy last night. Dustin asks why she hadn't told the cops, and she admits that it wasn't the only thing she saw while sitting on the couch watching TV. Her power started to flicker in and out, and comfortably familiar to the Hawkins kids at this point. When she heard Eddie scream and saw him run to his van, Max asked Dustin if it could be possible that the Upside Down is interfering with Hawkins yet again. They really need to get a grip on this whole gate situation. They team up with Steve and Robin at the video store while they film them in on what they know. They manage to track Eddie down to his Reefer Rick's, his drug dealer house. After Eddie relays the horrific events of the night prior, he is wary that Dustin tells him they believe him. Dustin decides it is time to fill him in on the Upside Down. He asks Eddie if he saw anything that looked like swirling dust. Eddie says no, but it seemed like Chrissy was under a spell. It dawns on both Dustin and Eddie at the same time. Vecna's curse. Vecna is, as Dustin explains, an undead creature of great power, a spellcaster, a dark wizard. As Dustin is explaining, we see Vecna connected to what looks like 8 vines, as if he is charging. He slowly kneels and opens his eyes. The camera zooms out, and we see he is holed up in some terrifying looking house in the Upside Down. Meanwhile, Nancy and Fred convince the cops patrolling the trailer park to let them in to check in on their good friend Max, when really they're there to get the scoop. As they're trying to fool the cop, he suddenly looks at Fred strangely and says he knows him. Fred was the one who killed that kid last year in a car crash. Fred looks petrified as suddenly the cop's voice starts to grow distorted. Nice knowing you, Fred. And his eyes turn white. Just a little spoiler alert. And his eyes turn white as his skin starts to rot. He begins to chant murderer repeatedly to a horrified Fred. Suddenly everything snaps back to normal, and Nancy and the cop are looking at him strangely. Nancy manages to talk to Eddie's uncle and convince him to tell her his side of the story. Wayne says that Eddie may look dangerous, but it just isn't in his nature to do something like this. Wayne believes that a man named Victor Creel killed Chrissy. Back when Wayne was a kid, Victor Creel lost his mind and killed his wife and kids and took out their eyes. Wayne thinks that Victor Creel somehow broke out of Penhurst Asylum and killed Chrissy just like he did with his family. As Nancy talks to Wayne, Fred starts to hear the dreaded sound of the chiming clock. He walks into the woods where he sees the clock lying on the ground and a group of people all dressed in black standing eerily still with their heads down. Little girl slowly lifts her head and points at Fred, her outstretched hand morphing into what looks like Vecna's creepy claw-like hand. The rest of the people slowly lift their heads, their faces looking like straight-up walkers from The Walking Dead, and start to chant murderer. Nancy suddenly realizes Fred is not where she left him by the fence. Panicked when she can't find him, she tells the cops on patrol. We see Fred running terrified through the woods, ending up on the road dark with no cars around except for one. Fred approaches the car slowly, a look of terror on his face. The car is upside down and consumed with flames. He sees a boy crawl out of the car, bloody, desperately calling out for help. Fred falls backwards into a grave where he turns to see a rotting corpse next to him. Then, here it comes. He hears his name. Vecna slowly walks through a tunnel leading into the grave and tells Fred he wants him to join him. He stretches out his claw-like hand as Fred floats up in the air on the road. Fred's bones begin to snap and his eyes pop out as he suffers the same horrific fate as Chrissy. And the episode comes to another horrifying conclusion. Yeah, very creepy. I don't really have much else to say about it. I just kind of wanted to give you guys the full plot. Just sum up the episode in a nice 15 minutes. I mean, I'm going to do that more often because these episodes are longer than Breaking Bad. As a matter of fact, they're like half hour longer. So I definitely need to be doing stuff like this, going through the plot intricately with you guys. But it's a great episode. 2 episodes, 2 victims. I wonder if episode 3, episode 4, episode 5, 6, 7, you could start to speculate, you could start to theorize who is going to be the next victims in this show, but you just never know. It's going to be interesting. I think Angela is going to be one of the victims. I think, yeah, Angela's going to be one of the victims. I have a feeling Eddie could possibly come into contact with Vecna, but we will have to see as we watch 2 more episodes tonight, and we're going to get an even bigger scoop. So leave a like, comment, subscribe, because tomorrow before I go to work at 3, I'm going to give you guys 2 episode reviews of Stranger Things, an episode review for Breaking Bad, and a new segment. And then Thursday, obviously, we will be back to watching basketball, which is